Following the Golden Rule with Andrew Faas is proudly supported by Remax St. Andrews. Live and vacation by the sea. Choose wisely. Choose Remax.
Hello, my name is Andrew Faas, and welcome to Following the Golden Rule.
And I'm Jay Remer, and for 26 weeks, Andy and I will be discussing the ABCs of building character. We've had 10 shows so far, and today is our 11th show, and it's on K is for kind. And it's a great word that is oftentimes misunderstood. It also, as we were discussing this show earlier, it's very heavily interlinked with a number of the other characteristics, which makes it kind of fun. But in the article that you wrote on kind, you made a distinction between kind and nice. And I'm wondering if you could just elaborate on that a little bit.
Sure. Well, kind, yes, it is a very interesting word, and quite frankly, my favorite word. And the distinction between kind and being nice, or even being polite, is an important one. And I think the being nice is, I would say, somewhat superficial. And being kind is actually doing something in a tangible way in terms of helping someone with what they're going through. Mm-hmm. And as I indicated when we talked about compassion and empathy, very important characteristics. However, as is the case with being nice or polite, it does connotate feeling sorry for or pitying. Mm-hmm. And being kind is actually doing something very helpful to yourself and to others that you are helping.
Well, you know, one of the things that that strikes me about that distinction, as I've thought about it, is, as you say, nice is a superficial kind of a thing, and it's something that we can put on. It's sort of like window dressing. We can change it, we can put it on, but kindness is innate, and it's part of your authenticity. Either you're authentically kind or you're not. And it's a very difficult one to kind of push over on people if it isn't really authentic.
Well, I'd refer people to and encourage them to watch the 1997 movie called As Good as It Gets. And that starred Jack Nicholson as Melvin Udall. And Melvin Udall was not a very nice person, and that's to put it kindly. Mm-hmm. However, as you will watch the movie, you will understand the difference between being nice and being kind, because mm-hmm. Melvin turns out to be a very kind person. Mm-hmm.
So why is kindness, why does it matter to you so much? You say it's your favorite of the ones. What about it has got you?
The reason kindness got to me started with my origin. And were it not for a German soldier and the German soldier's act of kindness, me and my four brothers may not have been conceived. Mm. And my dad was shot the first day of the occupation in the Netherlands. And he was guarded by a German soldier about the same age as my dad. And the German soldier said, "Make a run for it." But then he added, "I hope you do the same thing if roles were reversed." So it really, you talked about how the various characteristics kind of interrelate. And this is the essence, this was the essence of following the golden rule. So as kids, we were brought up with this story.
Yes.
And it also taught us something else that's very important, and we've lived through this, is not to stereotype. And in this case, not all Germans were Nazis.
Well, it's interesting because it reminds me of the story during World War II on Christmas Day, when enemy lines would drop their arms and shake hands, and they would just take time out. And it shows that it can be done. And it does show the kindness that humankind actually has within it. And so I think it's a beautiful story, and I'm glad you shared it with us. But in the news lately, there has been a story about Ellen DeGeneres. And Ellen DeGeneres, you know, she has a great reputation, but it's turned out that it is, you know, again, it's a facade, perhaps. What is your take on the accusation that she creates a toxic work environment?
Well, it's a case study, and I've written a lot about adult bullying. A couple of books, a number of magazines, interviewed hundreds of people in focus groups and individually, and it's very what is happening there, or has happened there, is very typical of what goes on in quite frankly most workplaces. And the one commonality, which is the most disturbing, is where people who know her in a different light have all come to, most of them have come to her defense, because with them, they, you know, she is very nice. And what these people are in essence saying is that the people who are making the accusations are lying. And I'm not going to judge whether Ellen, it's an accusation that, from my analysis, you know, has a lot of merit. However, the fact that she claims that she was not aware of the toxic environment, and that would suggest that, like in my experience, that all these board members who claim that there wasn't this bullying or abuse going on, they were either lying or they weren't doing their job. They didn't know what was going on.
Yeah.
And there's no way that that the toxic environment that progressed was not an open secret. So on Ellen, it's particularly sad because she branded kindness, and I think she always signed off, "Be kind." And she was a role model. And like Bill Cosby, over a totally different situation, she was a totally different person than what she portrayed herself to be. And that's very sad, because it brings it makes people more and more cynical relative to people's nature and their intent.
Well, you've talked about kindness as being a basic standard for equity, and how does that play out? Could you expand on that a bit?
It always seems strange to me that the things we admire in men, kindness, generosity, openness, honesty, understanding, and feeling, that are concomitants of failure in our system. And these traits that we detest, sharpness, greed, acquisitiveness, meanness, egotism, and self-interest, are the traits of success. And while men admire the quality of the first, they love the second. And that was written by John Steinbeck, a Depression-era writer. And his book, Grapes of Wrath, was banned. Those words, are so relevant today. And it's those traits that made the 1% or 10% of people successful. It's been on the backs of the other 90%. And that's a core of inequality. And today we have to look at ourselves in terms of what we are doing to help others. Because since he wrote these words, we've gotten to be less and less and less kind. And I go back to the statistic that the Faas Foundation and Mental Health America did in their Mind the Workplace study. Is 2/3 of people cannot count on their coworkers for support when things go bad. And I would suggest to you, things have gotten worse, and I think that 2/3 could have got, maybe is notched up a bit. And we have no idea how people are going through the kind of stress that they're going through with the basics, and certainly relative to the uncertainty in the future. And the kindest thing that people can do is before they're asked to go out and listen to people that you're responsible for or close to, and ask how you're doing. And not wait for them to ask you for help. And in these times, the kindest thing that people can do is stop being a bystander. And listen and hear how people are feeling and why they feel the way they do. And that will identify stress points that people are dealing with. And with that knowledge, you can help people work through the stresses they're going through. And it doesn't always mean they have to dig into your pocket. It means having somebody listen to me and understand what I'm going through.
I think what you're saying really encapsulates sort of part of being emotionally intelligent, because if you can pick up on the emotions of other people, then you can proactively help them. And I think that it is it's something that you either have an ability to do and to notice, or you don't. But it is as we do self-reflective exercises through this, we can become better at it. and wondering if you have any suggestions for people who are interested in looking at themselves a little bit more deeply as far as their kindness goes.
Yes, well, and again, when it gets to the interrelation between the various characteristics, and certainly emotional intelligent, or being emotionally intelligent, it goes a long way relative to being able to identify where people are struggling and may require some help. The other one is observant, being observant, and we're going to cover that. And O is for observant, and many people, for a variety of reasons, or most people for a variety of reasons, feel ashamed or fearful about exposing what they're going through as a sign of weakness. And there are a lot of indicators that are nonverbal where people can pick up on there's something not right here, and let me probe. Getting back to the whole definition of kindness is second to what I just referred to. The kindness, another very kind thing that people can do is, when do we intervene? How do we provide critical feedback? How do we hold people accountable? How do we include others? How do we express gratitude? How do we celebrate the success of others? How do we hear somebody out? How do we express displeasure? How do we give praise? How do we volunteer? How do we make people happy? How do we stay connected with people that we cherish? How do we react to bad news? And how do we challenge others? And with many, if not all of these, you can be mean-spirited about it, or you can be kind about it. And it's not just a matter of being polite or being nice. It's a matter of genuine kindness. You know, how often do we hear the expression, a sheep in wolf's clothing? And a test for kindness is, at the right time, and if there's a question mark as to whether or not you're dealing with a sheep or a wolf, test it by asking the individual, or saying something to the individual that they may not want to hear. And the reaction will tell you a lot about the person, whether they're just nice when things go good, and when things go bad, they become this, as the president would say, this ugly person. And everyone, you know, will be in a position to have to convey something that people don't want to hear. And the kindest thing, and I guess I define being kind as being able to tell people what they may not want to hear.
Yeah, but what they need to hear.
And telling people what they need to hear.
Yeah. It is, there's a great art to that. And people who innately are kind have honed this art to a fine point. And one of the things that I think we can see even today in the workplace, in the way firings and layoffs are handled, is if you have to lay off a number of people, what do you do to help those people move to the next step? Do you assist them in getting another job, or do you just say, well, good luck and off you go? Or do you actually make an effort? And I know, for example, in Macadam, where there's been this plant shutdown, the whole community is getting around these people and making sure that they remain stable and have got a future. That, to me, is an example of a kind community.
Yes, a great example, and communities are going to be, and citizens are going to be faced with this, on a fairly regular and ongoing basis for the foreseeable future. Another aspect of kindness is how do you deal with someone who has been kind to you? And that really hit home to me early in my career when I had to invite somebody out of the business. Mm-hmm. And I've had to invite, and I use the expression invite out versus terminate or fire, because what we're in most cases talking about is a transfer or a getting somebody reestablished elsewhere. Mm-hmm. But the day after I invited this individual out, he called me and thanked me. And I thought, like, is he being funny here, or? But he said, the way you handled it. And then asked, how are you doing? Mm-hmm. Because he said, I know it was hard. I broke down. Mm-hmm. But being the recipient of kindness is important. Mm-hmm. And lots of times when people thank me for something, I used to say, oh, it's nothing. Well, wait a minute. It means a lot. Mm-hmm. And if people can internalize that, mm-hmm. Through the experiences that they had or have had, then it influences how they interact with kindness to others. So, I get people to test this in terms of a number of things. Mm-hmm. And there's a list of things that I've kind of looked at is how we're acknowledged, or how do we acknowledge others? How do we recognize somebody in need? How do we respond to a request? How do we give? What's our motivation in giving? And in some cases, in mass, now people are being, it's over Zoom, or in some cases through an email. And this is where kindness really comes into play, in terms of not considering it a termination, but helping the person look at it as a transition to something else, but not leaving them on their own, mm-hmm. but helping them through that transition. Mm-hmm. And it's not only the leader that has to help in that, it's the co-workers and family members and friends that need to be kind in terms of helping people through these transitions. Mm-hmm. And I hate to say it, and I don't want to be a pessimist about it, but we are in a depression. and it's only going to get worse unless there's a huge, massive stimulus bailout in pretty much every country, or certainly in North America.
Well, I think it is, this takes us to another point that we have emphasized in all of these episodes, and that is the importance of self-reflection, and because this all begins with the individual. And as individuals need to really take time to think about how kind are we when someone comes to us, and likewise, how kind are other people to us? Because it's such a fundamentally important trademark of good leadership.
It's a fundamental characteristic in leadership. And I'd like to end just with a quote. Guard well within yourself that treasure, which is kindness. Know how to give without hesitation, how to learn without regret, and how to acquire without meanness. That's by George Sand, and it articulately captures the whole essence of what we're trying to convey here.
It does. Thank you, Andy. I hope that you will take some time to do some self-reflection, as you have with other characteristics in this series, and see how you do from week to week. It's quite an interesting exercise that I'm going through and finding it very revealing. So thank you for letting us into your living room this evening, and we look forward to seeing you next week when we discuss L is for Loyal.
Following the Golden Rule with Andrew Faas is proudly supported by Remax St. Andrews. Live and vacation by the sea. Choose wisely. Choose Remax.